Hi, this is Fran with Stampendous, and we're continuing my watercolor series every Friday, having some fabulous fun. And this is week 137. And today we're going to feature our dolphin play and some other things with beach and shells and fish next week. So keep watching along, and we'll find that at a time when we can't go to the beach, perhaps we can enjoy painting wherever we'd like to be. So that's a good plan, don't you think? So our dolphin play set gives us lots of very fun options in putting together this scene that we're going to stamp for starters here. So we've got clouds, we've got ocean, and we've got a little island or edge of land in the horizon. So I'm not going to tape the edges on this one, and this is 3 by 4 1/4, and the width of this allows me to just stamp across the edges here. And again, I designed this in pieces to give you more flexibility. You might want more or less sky, but we're just going to stamp this going across here. And then the third piece will give us more waves, or in this case, allow us to create our beach. So I'm going to just stamp those two close together. Okay, so we'll start with the sky. I intentionally wanted to give more space up here to just have fun playing with some sky and clouds. I've replenished paint into my palette, so you'll be aware when it's moist out of the tube, you may really grab a lot of pigment. See what's happening there. Okay, so we'll get lots of water going here. A little bit more pigment up here at the top. I haven't taped the edges on this one, but we're not going to get it that wet overall, that I'm just going to work with it this way. And with the sense of larger clouds high up and smaller clouds in the distance, my paper is bowing a little bit, so let's let that. Oh, look at there. That's kind of fun. If we can just get it to stay that way, maybe I'll prop it up. Some watercolor artists work on a slanted table. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do my greens because I don't mind some of the blue and green mixing together here. I'm going to come back in here with a wet brush as I see it's drying differently. Each time it's different. I quite like how I left white up in there, and that made for a dramatic little bit of cloud in there. Okay, and now for some more of our water here. I'm going to bring in some darker shades to the side, and that is really wet. And I'm going to bring in some of the marine blue as well. That's where my brush is really wet, but let's move it around some. Okay, we're going to leave a lot of this white to look like the white caps here. Here with our wet on wet technique, we'll let these colors kind of all run together. Let that dry a little bit, and I'll move my palette to do our sandy beach here. If you had continued painting with blues, it would just look like a wave rolling in, but it's quite fun to be able to make it into a little section of the beach here. So for that, we'll need to mix beige, tan kind of brown. So here's our brown area as we left it from last time. And I'll go a lot into the lighter shades of color here, and we'll put some into this compartment. So this is the new gamboge color that gives us this warm yellow. Okay, so let's see here. Let's test our color. Okay, that looks pretty good. And again, a lot of water is just toning it down. So let's do a wash, a light wash to start with. And build up some more layers. We don't want it to be even. It would be better to have some patchiness or texture to it here. So just do some wet on wet. Dotting the things. And then we'll make it intentionally darker to enhance that edge of the white coming in there. Let's see. With a very light wash, I'm going to come into some of these areas, and it's going to give the illusion of just a real thin wash of water coming in. And since this area is nice and wet, I was going to experiment a little bit more with some salt effects, and it needs to be quite wet to work, but let's try it out here if we get it on quick. So here I'm just taking my table salt, which is my finest texture option of salt. Okay, and now with the salt, we're going to leave it on there until it dries. We don't want to remove it too soon and disturb it. So that was good timing to add it there at the end. And I'm going to set it aside, and we'll come back and take a look at it later. So now I've got a panel that's 3 3/4 by 8 1/4 to make a slim card. And this vertical, we've got to move things around to keep it all in sight. But we'll do our stamping next, and we can just fast forward it. But you'll see how the same stamps can give us a totally different look now with a whole underwater scene. On this one, I used the coral stamp, which is from the Go Fish set, but this beautiful coral combination here is from the Dolphin Play set, so we'll proceed with using that one. And I wanted you to take a closer look. As you can see here, I did a lot of different little experimental things with the water, and so I'm going to set this aside for a moment, and we're going to experiment a little bit and then come back to this. So here, let's take a look at some of my experimenting with different kinds of salt. Now, as I can see already on this one, this did a really fun look for my sandy beach here on the bottom of this little watercolor, and it's still not completely dry, so I don't want to disturb it. But I brought these out to show you. And we're going to start down here, let's see, with these that are completely dry. And it took some time to dry, so that's why I'm kind of proceeding this way. So on these different panels, I took a really strong blue, and it was very wet when I applied the salt. And on the first one, I did your really fine table salt. And then I had several other granulations of salt from all different things. This one was kind of an in-between size granules, and then this one was rock salt, which was my largest granules. And then this one here was actually a very special, this is a jacquard silk salt, which was intended to use with all of the beautiful silk painting and things. So I tried each one, and now they've had plenty of time to dry, and they will have the most effect when you apply them into very wet paint, and then you just have to let it dry. So down here, I did multiple colors to see how that would affect it. And so now you get to see the result as I rub away all of this salt. So it's quite crusty, but now I can rub it away without disturbing the paint underneath to see our ultimate effect. Okay, so here's our fine table salt. So our next size granules, our rock salt, and our silk salt. Okay, so of all of the different ones, I was as pleased with any of them as with the fine texture of the table salt. And it had the most, it kind of bleached away the most. So I'll encourage you to experiment with whatever salt you have on hand. And if you want to get into some of the other specialty ones, you can do that too. And we will now let you see how it develops. Okay, so I taped my panels down so that I can really get them plenty wet and it won't be a problem. And this one is 2 3/4 by 5 1/4, and this one is 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. And they were just some small pieces, but I thought I might as well stamp just to kind of place where our colors are. And it's good to just experiment and see what effects we can create here on these small pieces. And I'm going to do all of my blues and experimenting first, and we'll add salt and let it dry. So I won't be able to probably finish these, but we'll learn from this and incorporate it back into our other painting. Okay, it's nice. We've got all different shades of blues and greens available here. We need to work quickly. On this one, I'm going to go from light to dark, and then I'm going to keep this darker at the top and go lighter here. We'll do darks down here. So let's just get a whole bunch of beautiful shades of blue, and nice and wet, lots of pigment, lots of water. I'm going to get it wet all the way. I just realized if I want to tip my panel, it'll be hard to do opposite colors here. I wanted to try a couple of things. So I've got some bubble wrap, and let's do some of that first. So that's kind of lifting from one area and applying it to another, which is kind of fun. And I wanted to play with a bit of plastic wrap. And some of this, you kind of have to put it in place and then let it dry. So we'll do some of that down here at the bottom. And then I wanted to flick some water as well. It won't matter if it gets on that one, for that matter anyway, although we'll probably work over it. Okay, and then the salt needs to still go in while things are pretty wet. So we'll put a bunch of salt in the wetter areas. Okay, and now we're going to leave that to dry. And then let's do a combination of things on this one. And this is where it's fun to just be able to play and try some different things. where you haven't invested a whole lot of time yet into painting all the details of the fish or the dolphins. Let's let this one be lighter here. And then let's flick some darker colors into it. As you can see, I'm getting it into my palette there, so that's kind of fun, and I'm liking the contrast of the light blues. So let's take our bubble wrap that had some bits of darker color and see what that does. That moved a lot of the color around. And I just got a small piece so that it was easier to work with. And now this may not be wet enough to have much effect with the salt, but we'll put in some of the larger salt here as well. And some of the finer salt. And then, as sometimes you might do with an eyedropper, we have our needle tip. So I'm going to add some more water in places here in case that enhances the effect of our salt. And then this one, I think we need some darker blues on top. Okay, so we're now going to set this aside, let it dry, and go back to our other scene, and you'll have to keep watching to see how we finish up with these. Okay, so now hopefully we can work over here without splashing our palette or getting our original too splattered with the second round, although it might not matter a whole lot. But okay, so I'm going to start with some blue and we'll work our way down here. I think I'll do a lighter sky because I want more of the attention to go to the blues in here. And a lot of what we've been talking about as we've painted has been composition and design and color values, all sorts of things. And we've thrown in a lot of techniques, whether or not I have named them or described them. But we've been going all year with our one brush and our 6 colors of paint. And I hope you've practiced some along the way. I know not all of you have had the stamp sets that we've used, but I hope you've found some that you liked and have enjoyed using them to practice. And that's really what it comes down to. And by working small, hopefully it allows the freedom to experiment and enjoy whatever you paint along your journey of learning watercolors. Okay, so that'll keep the sky light. We'll add maybe just a little bit more up here at the top. By doing a little bit of color underneath the clouds, that kind of makes them seem perhaps a little bit more three-dimensional. And I've added just a little washes on the underside of the clouds, just so they don't look too stark there. Okay, and this is the easy way to leave white clouds along the horizon of the ocean. Now this is wonderful to have pre-mixed all of these different shades of color. So let's add even a bit more yellow here. That's very green, but let's put a little bit of it in and we'll add some other color as well, certainly. Some of this we'll just let it mix right on the paper. So now instead of our white caps coming up to the beach, we actually just have wonderful swirl of water here as the dolphins they've been jumping, I'm sure. One time when I was down in Laguna Beach, we were at a little cove where there's this castle, that kind of a tower that goes down to the water level. And anyway, some people were swimming, and it was a beautiful day. And all of a sudden, everyone sort of stopped what they were doing because these dolphins came way in close to the cove, and there were several of them. And it looked as though they were studying us as much as we were studying them. And everyone stopped what they were doing, and it was as though they were busy watching us. And it was just a wonderful experience to see them so close. And they were playing out in the water and watching the swimmers. So I'm just doing all different little shades of blues and greens and letting my brush dance around. Now we want to get some deeper color. We want some of this beautiful ultramarine blue. And I'm going to go over the dolphins. We'll maybe lift some of the color away, but let's get some beautiful, rich range of color up here. I'll sort of work around them a little bit, but some soft blues across them isn't bad. So now I'm just sort of lightening my colors as I move down, but since these are going to dry a little bit lighter, I want to get some rich blues up here at the top. Let's do a little bit with our bubble wrap, and let's add some salt. And I'm going to add even more color on top and see what that does. And let's do some more splashing up here while it's wet. I think a lot of my different textures are all just kind of merging together here. But let's continue with keeping this wet and moving some more color down. And again, I've sort of let it get lighter down here at the bottom. And this is where sort of anything goes in terms of blues and greens. We don't want it to be flat color, so, and if we want it lighter, we can lift some color here. I'm just using a clean, okay, so let's see. I like the look of the splashed color. So let's splash some of our greens. Some marine blue. You might not want too much speckling up in the sky. And I could have covered it, but I caught it there before it completely dried. It lifted away. Okay, so we're going to let that area dry, and we can still work down here on our corals. And these could be all sorts of colors. I saw an interesting program about fluorescent colors underwater in the darks, and it was just amazing all the color that's there, whether we can see it or not. Let's try some yellows. Just making up my colors here on. Sadly, I've never learned how to scuba dive or all that being underwater and breathing through the mask and everything was not something I figured out very readily. But I have been to Hanauma Bay, where you could just stand in the shallow water and the fish would just come and almost eat the little frozen peas right out of your hands. To get a coral color, you can combine some rose with the scarlet, and that gives you different shades of a more coral red here. We'll tone that down a little bit. add a little bit of green to our little fish here. In Hanauma Bay, there would be all these little fish just swirling around your ankles. And if you reached out to touch them, whoo, they were fast. Away they went. But they just kept the water swirling. And then on the dolphins, I used some nice grays, and I intentionally kind of did some little crisscross lines as though the light coming through the water would kind of give a dappled look to the surface of the dolphin's skin. So let's just add a bit of blue-gray here. And I might wait till this was drier, but let's add a bit here. Some of this painting over the top is going to disturb the blues still drying underneath. And this one is sort of disappearing into the waterway. We'll leave it light around the eye. Some of this all kind of ran together into such a similar pattern that I'm going to add some more water on top and see what that does, and maybe even lift a little bit of color away. I don't want to use that. Okay, and now I'm going to move it very carefully, keep it level, and let it dry a bit more. I wanted to show you one more thing here. I found that even after it was dry, if there's some spots of color, let's say on the dolphin's face, you can get a wet brush and lift it away if it hit right in a place that looked awkward to seeing the face. So that was one helpful thing. And then with a wet brush, I've done some strokes along here that give the illusion of rays of light coming through the water. And I wanted to do a little bit more of that up above here as well. Anyway, that gives you a couple more tips of interesting things that you can do to affect the final look of your watercolor. Okay, this is still wet, but I quite like the beautiful just changes of color that happened. And so this one, I pulled it away and it gave me some more angular kind of lines. So it didn't show up a whole lot, but I had it in such a small area. And some of the rest of this is still wet. Maybe I will reposition this a little bit further up. Kind of blend those shapes in together. Now that it's dry, I'm going to brush away the salt. I'm going to see if I can lift some color on the dolphin with just a wet brush here. Actually, just doing that amount is quite nice because that lets you see the face. Now I'm going to add some grays here and there. On this one, I'm going to just add some tints of color. Okay, and now let's reveal here. So the tape made it easy on these to stamp across the edges, and don't be afraid of things disappearing. It gives you an interesting illusion of an aquarium or a view underwater here, where things are in and out of your view. So you might enjoy just the monochromatic with the blues, or you might like it with just a touch of color. And here we can see just the face there of the dolphin, which is kind of fun. So that'll be a quick way to try some fun little watercolors, just with splashing and experimenting and some salt and some bubble wrap and some plastic wrap. And I'm sure each one of yours will be a unique and fun expression. So I hope you'll give it a try and have some fun with watercolors, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. And now take a look at a couple of the cards all finished. Bye-bye.